Summertime. Sunshine, fresh air, peace and quiet. And the Great American Bash. Relive the greatest moments in history making matches.
This is where the summertime kicks off.
As legends and icons clashed at the Bash.
Oh my God, they're standing now. Stinger has done it.
It's a comprehensive look at the annual Summer Classic. United We Slam. The best of the Great American Bash.
This is the Pro Wrasslin Reflection Podcast with your host, the Professor Chalbelo Veracruz.
What a run!
Mr. Wonderful Tommy Wonder.
And I will take the powers of those that have no fear!
And the prodigal one, JB.
The cream, yeah. The cream of the crop.
Now it's time to go back in time in the time machine.
The dream! Dusty Rhodes! Sweet!
The living legend, Bruno Sammartino.
Austin 316 says I just whipped your ass. To be the man, you gotta beat the man. Woo! Look at this. I don't believe it.
Happy 4th of July weekend, Reflectionites. All you patriotic Reflectionites, the red, white, and blue Reflectionites, the ones waving their flags Reflectionites, the ones drinking their beer Reflectionites, in the porch, on the boats, having the hot dogs, the hamburgers. You are celebrating Americana weekend here at the PWR Podcast, here at the PWR Networks at podbean.com. And I am your host of Americana. I am the host with the most. I am the man, bleeding red, white, and blue in his bloodstreams, but it's not the American flag, it's the Puerto Rican flag, but that's another story for another day. But anyway, I am the most glorious Americana host. I am the most scholarly Americana host. I am the most effervescent Americana host. But most importantly, I am the most objective Americana man in this YWC. I am the most objective man in this podcast punditry. I am your host, the Professor Chalbelo Cruz, welcoming the Magnificent Seven, the Elite Eight, the Naughty Nine, the Terrific 10, the Essential 11, who listen religiously on PWR Networks at podbeam.com. Of course, those big Vitoites on the Big Vito brand. We welcome you here at your Podbeam's locations too. And if you're lucky enough, we got some Reflectionites listening. Well, not listening, but viewing us on the PWR YouTube networks. So I'm not here alone to celebrate the Americanas. I have my cohort in crime. He has his flag draped over his house. He has his flag planted on his green lawns of America. Well, he also has the flag dripped over on his toy Hall of Fame. He is your friend and mine. He is Mr. Wonderful. He is the liberal conservative. I don't know. I don't like that. I still love conservative liberal. I still have the t-shirts. God damn it. But anyway, he is your friend of mine. T Strong, the dum-dum duo of all dum-dum duos. The Iron Stomach one. Tommy Wonder, how are you doing on this 4th of July weekend?
Now that this iPad's working right, good. I'm doing good.
Well, we're celebrating Americana with Japanese equipment. That's the old saying.
Right. Korean, isn't this?
I don't know.
What's LG is all Korean stuff.
Could be.
Yeah. But, yeah. It's a good topic. It's a good, I hate that Survivor Series isn't on Thanksgiving anymore. I hate Starrcade. Got flat out moved to December. I get it, business decisions. And at the end of the day, we complain about people shopping on Thanksgiving, making people have to work. So, you know what? It probably should have never been on Thanksgiving in the first place, other than when it was the Starrcade, other than when it was like just a local thing. And it was easy for people to go from eating their bird to the show, and it was a tradition. Then when they started rotating it, moving everywhere, that kind of made it a begrudging day to work for the concessions, the wrestlers having to be away from home on that holiday. And so Great American Bash is synonymous with the 4th of July, even though there's been Great American Bashes, I think, maybe not June, but early July and late July, and not necessarily on. I was actually, I researched some of this stuff before we did this. 88 was the first pay-per-view, but it started in 85. So 85 was, again, more of a local annual thing they did in whatever area.
Hold that thought. Well, Reflectionites, since we're bantering back and forth, because this is boardroom style, I haven't even said what we're even doing here. This is the PWR Podcast. This is the Pro Wrestling Spotlight, and we are here because, TW always drinks. He drinks a lot of the liquor. He drinks a lot of the beers, and since this is Americana's weekend, he already has got the conversation going, and we are talking about the Great American Bash. We're talking about the Great American Bashes from the NWAs in the 85s, in the mid-80s. We're talking about the Great American Bashes from the WCWs in the 90s. And maybe we'll talk about the little sprinklets of the WWEs trying to recapture the glory of the Great American Bashes. But yes, TW is right. It is a Dusty Rhodes creation from 1985. And it was a Dusty Rhodes creation that he wanted to create a summer tradition for, the NWA wrestlers. TW, you are right. The first pay-per-view of the Great American Bash was 1988, but we can talk about 1985 first, which, like I said, this is a Dusty Rhodes creation. 1985 is the boom period. You know what I mean, TW? Let's be honest with the boom period because, rock and wrestling is going on. WrestleMania 1 was a monster success. Dusty Rhodes wanted to capitalize on, the fandom of professional wrestling. And, of course, you have the NWA, and the NWA is already steamrolling with the emergence of the Four Horsemen. Ric Flair is your top guy of the NWA, the heavyweight champion of the world. So we need something to fill up the summer months because, traditionally, Thanksgiving, as you said it, was the most important day on the calendar for the territories because that was their blow-off. So the summers, why was the summers, TW, in your humble opinion, kind of like the slow days? Because, we know people go out for baseball in the summertime. You want to see the Mets, you want to see the Tigers, you want to see the Dodgers. But I guess maybe Dusty Rhodes thought to bring the Americana tradition into the summertime for professional wrestling. And Great American Bash was that perfect, the storm, the perfect storm of events for professional wrestling. What say you, TW?
Two answers to that question. You didn't really ask this one, but I believe the reason they picked summer is because, obviously it became a quarterly thing because inevitably you have WrestleMania, SummerSlam, Survivor Series, and then Royal Rumble, which aren't exactly spaced out 3 months apart. But by doing July to Thanksgiving, it's almost 6 months, so it's a halfway point. So Starrcade can lead to the Bash, Bash can lead to Starrcade. So you don't have year-long feuds, just 6-month-long feuds. The reason summer doesn't draw, when I was wrestling indies, we wrestled during the school year, basically was really the big draws, right? Big draws, 200 people. Because you would wrestle in a school, or you would wrestle in a bingo hall, or you would wrestle in a ice rink, like a local ice rink, not the damn New York Madison Square Garden. But and people would come because A, it's cold. People would rather be indoors for most of that. And B, it's easy to advertise to students in a school when it's happening at that school, blah, blah, blah. And then the summer comes, and we didn't do any of, all those shows that I wrestled for that had any continuity between show to show with angles and stuff like that. Then in the summer, we would wrestle festivals where, you'd wrestle at a carnival that let us set up the ring on the tennis court. Or in the best match I've ever had in my life was against Kid Copperpot in an ice rink. I talked about it before at the Livonia Spree because people just came in to get out of the heat. And they didn't necessarily come because it was wrestling, and they cheered the good guy, booed the bad guy, and it was just awesome, right? So because they participated. They didn't just come in there and sit on their hands. But the reason wrestling's slow in the summer is because, A, You don't have a lot of those buildings to use because they're closed for the summer, schools and stuff like that. And people travel. People go to Cedar Point. People go to SeaWorld. People do stuff as families. They go on vacation. So they're not home to do what they would normally do in March or whatever if they made a weekly, Starrcade and all that stuff was the big show, but they wrestled in Atlanta every week. They wrestled in Dallas every week. We didn't do that here. We wrestled once a month. Because once a week, you would definitely not, you wouldn't get everybody to show up for every show. They come once a month because they feel like it's a happening versus if it was every week, to use church as an example, if you miss 1 week, no big deal, right? Well, if everybody misses that same week, it is a big deal because you're probably not going to have another show because you lost your money on the one that nobody showed up at.
It is funny you say that because let's kind of focus on that first, like the mid-'80s, when Dusty Rhodes wanted to create this summer tradition. You just said, the church, let's go with that church atmosphere because, world class every Monday or maybe every Friday was the Sportatorium. I forget which day it is, but you know what I'm talking about. Jerry Lawler's Mid-South Coliseum every Monday. You had to be at that venue. So, Dusty Rhodes and the NWA does the Omni in Atlanta, Georgia. But they can't do that every week because that's a big building. And you don't want to, like you said, that you want to do smaller venues, whereas the armories and stuff like that, you get like 2,000 people. You want it, especially on TV purposes, TW, you want it to look like it's filled up with people screaming like that. So you don't want to see like empty seats. So Dusty Rhodes wanted to create an attraction of a big event. We know it's a WrestleMania type event. It's a big event. And you're right, because from Starrcade was November of every year before,
But basically December, because it was the last week of November.
Well, it was
how many Thursdays there were.
Yeah,
right.
But it was Thanksgiving where the blow-offs happened. So you needed, like you hit the nail on the head. You needed to create something, the gapper. You had to fill that gap in the summer. So the Great American Bash, whether Dusty Rhodes knew it or not, created a masterpiece by having a big-time event called the Great American Bash. So TW, before we even talk about the memories of the Great American Bash, the NWA, again, Ric Flair was the heavyweight champion. Tully Blanchard was either the television champion or the national heavyweight champion. We know Arn Anderson and Ole Anderson, the Anderson brothers were always fighting, to either try to become the tag team champions or they were the national tag team champions. So you already had your agitators. Dusty Rhodes is there. And remember, the Road Warriors are not there just yet. But I know that Dusty Rhodes was shrewd enough to know that he can steal the Road Warriors away from Bird and Gagne because of this event, TW. Because I remember in 1985, the Road Warriors actually came to the NWA as the AWA Tag Team Champions. So the Forbidden Door, I hate that word. I hate that word, TW, because it's been used a lot loosely, but anybody remember this, Reflectionites? And I'm not joking. You can go to the after mags. The AWA Tag Team Champions was on not only on NWA television, but at an NWA event like the Great American Bash, TW. That is the definition of the Forbidden Door being open. What say you, TW?
It's definitely not ever going to happen again, other than Smoky Mountain belts being on Raw. But back then, AWA was a legitimate place to make a living, right?
Right.
And maybe Smoky Mountain was too, but I don't think they were making, they were probably trying to sell merch on top of it, not knowing when they're going to pay their bills. But that's pretty impressive because I didn't know that, and that's probably a non-televised one.
Yeah, I don't know if it's non-televised, but TW, I mean, remember, like the first three before the 1988 one, because then it kind of like, it's very expensive because Dusty Rhodes' vision was it was a summer tour the whole month of July, 4 Saturdays or Sundays of July, something was popping off at an NWA Great American Bash event. Because remember, 1985, that year, Ric Flair versus Nikita Koloff? That was the event, Great American Bash, where Ric Flair came down from the helicopter in Charlotte, North Kakalaki to face the Russian Nightmare, Nikita Koloff. That was a Great American Bash event. Dusty Rhodes versus Tully Blanchard. I forget which belt it was, but it was in a steel cage, and that was a Great American Bash event. The Russians against the Road Warriors in a chain match. That was a Great American Bash event. That's what. Doesn't that sound like a stack card right there? That you cannot miss those kind of main events. What say you, TW?
Yep. But I'm going to say this. 1990, the first pay-per-view one, felt like...
Well, that's the third one.
It's the third one, but the first pay-per-view is... I'm sorry, 88. 88 was the first... You're right. So, yeah, third one. Anyway, 1990 felt more like a Clash of the Champions. Even though you had Luger, Sting versus Flair was the build-up, obviously. Two things happened. First, Great American Bash in 85, this happened. Opening match was Buddy Landel. 1990, opening match is Buddy Landel. Closing match is Ric Flair versus Sting. He literally is in the ring with a pink robe with sequins on it, and he is called the Nature Boy Buddy Landel. And to me, that's always weird to me. Because that would be still like having Gilbert in the opening match and then Goldberg in the closing match on WWE. You're not putting Gilbert on a show that Goldberg's on because he felt like it was a knock. Granted, Buddy Landel was not a knock on Ric Flair, but there was heat over it, and or like he was calling himself the real Nature Boy when it was still territories, right? When there was no one to tell him no. By 88, there's someone to tell him no, and for them to announce him as Nature Boy Buddy Landel. It's mind-blowing to me that Ric Flair wasn't like, screw you, because nobody really did a figure four leg lock unless they were in a match with Ric Flair trying to do his move to him, right? So obviously Flair had...
TW, to be fair. Well, I don't even want to say to be fair, but Ric Flair got Buddy Landel back. I mean, even though he's calling himself the Nature Boy, but he's opening the match. He's not very much valued no matter where he is. And even if it's a pay-per-view event, he wasn't valued on TV. He wasn't valued on TBS. He was there to fill the card to me. So Ric Flair didn't feel threatened.
But you still have him sullying the name. What if someone turned it on, just heard Nature Boy, didn't pay attention to Buddy Landel, and then watched him get mopped up on Saturday night and thought, that's Ric Flair, and then never watched again?
I understand that as a casual viewer, but, we're the hardcore fans. We know that the real, true Nature Boy is Buddy Rogers. He was the first. Ric Flair stole it from him, and people said,
he might as well call himself Nature Boy Buddy Flair.
He should, but,
Rip Rogers. And then he can piss off Rip Rogers on top of it.
It's funny that, you remember Buddy Landel, opening at 85, and then, hindsight's 2020 that he opened in 1990. So
I know because I watched him open in 90, and then I read he opened the very first Great American Bash in 85, and I thought, that's weird. I wonder if he just did it every year. Another side note is 1990, Tom Zink was the Z-Man. I don't know why he couldn't have been called Tom Zink. He was Vader's debut in a squash. And in 1991, he was the worst debut of the worst character in the history of wrestling. He was the debut for Oz, where he had to stay in the ring for about fucking 8 minutes for that skit to play out, only for Kevin Nash to come out and beat him in about 4 seconds with the tornado giant swing backslide move. And I just thought, wow, I do remember thinking, wow, Tom Zink lost that quick, but the whole logic was the guy was a monster, right? Seeing that he lost to Vader the year before, it's amazing to me that no one ever just gave up on Zink, like fans, right? They still got behind him. He still was a pretty boy. He never won anything, but that's Joey Mag's territory right there. When you two pay-per-view, 2 Great American Bashes in a row, you're a squash for a debuting new guy.
Well, the checks were really big there. I do it too. I think you would do it too, TW. You would get squashed by Vader and Oz and be like, and you would be on social media with just like, you think I'm losing? You think I'm not making it in wrestling? I show my stacks that big, Reflectionites. Let's go. I like that you're going everywhere around here. So I'm going to go back into the 80s, We don't have to talk about 85. Let's talk about like 1986. Let's talk about the professor's memory of 1986 because I had the VHS video cassette of the Great American Bash of that particular year. So I don't know if you ever saw that one or you remember the VHS of 86?
I remember VHSs. I did not Everything you're about to drop on me is going to be learning. I'm under the coach. You like John the coach. I'm under the professor's learning tree right now.
Well, stand back.
I remember the stories.
Well, not the stories, but, if any Reflectionite has that VHS of 1986, it was hosted by Bill Apter and Gordon Solie, and they were giving, spots, they were talking about all the major spots of the particular 1986 tours of the Great American Bash. So why the 86 Bash really caught the professor's eye, TW, and all the Reflectionites out there is because I remember that particular year, Ric Flair, if you want to talk about storylines, TW, Ric Flair was on Saturday, TBS 605, proclaiming his greatness, saying that he's going to defend his title at the Great American Bash Tour 13 times in that month span. So, they caught one moment where he was at the Philadelphia stadium where the Phillies played, and he had a title defense against Road Warrior Hawk. He had a title defense against Ricky Morton in another stadium. And this particular year in 86, NWA was doing stadiums. If you go with the kayfabe commentaries, they were packing them like 30, 40, 50,000 people in the stadium. They were making money. Jim Crockett was making money. But TW, before I even get into the Ric Flair thing, I mean, the stadium aspect, and Jim Crockett is making all this money, but he does not know. He needs a bookkeeper. He needs a bookkeeper. If he's selling out stadiums and being a major threat to Vince McMahon, because the Carolinas, the Southern wrestling territory, it belonged to Crockett. There was no going wrong. You had the players, TW. Again, hindsight's 2020, but knowing that at least in 86, they were doing stadiums in the summer. They were drawing good people in the summer. As you said, it was the slow months. How could NWA have failed with all that money, with the money?
Here's why, right? So it's, the logic, old money, new money, right? New money's people winning lotteries or signing contracts. Old money is money that's passed down, 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 down. If you pay attention to a lot of people with money now, the one thing they make their kids get is an education. I don't know if Jim Crockett Jr. or David Crockett, I don't know if those guys went to school. The problem is, even if they did, they didn't go to school for the right thing, like business management, whatever. And so everything we're talking about, 88's the first summer, or I think it's the first SummerSlam, but 88's the first Great American Bash as a pay-per-view, also the first SummerSlam. I would stand to say, sure, there's going to be people that disagree with me relentlessly. SummerSlam produced more memories for me as a kid, and to be fair, I didn't get to watch the NWA till later. But even having watched this 1999 or 1990, which I had never 91, 90 Sting vs. Flair, I had never watched it before, so I watched it, and again, it came off as a free Clash of the Champions with a huge main event, where SummerSlam was something they built up to for 6 months, and to be fair, February to July because Sting's injury. But opening matches of Buddy Landel versus, I don't remember who he wrestled. And then 1991 was Harley Race versus Tommy Rich. Like, they thought they were going to get some reaction for it because now they're both 60 wrestling each other like they did in 82 or 81, whatever year it was. No one cared, right? And even 91, Luger versus Wyndham, the crowd is just not into it. And then throughout the match,
we'll get into that.
Teases a little bit like he wants them to be into it. I've said this before. The fans are sitting there just waiting for you to give them a reason to be there. So if you never do, they don't. Whenever someone blames fans for sitting on their hands, pay attention. It's because the wrestler's not engaging them. They just think that their moves are supposed to make them pop. And they do sometimes. But here's the deal. You can only pop for the Frankensteiner once, maybe the second time because he does it to a bigger guy. And you're like, whoa. But once you've seen it, you're not going to have that same first reaction to it. So after you do the Frankensteiner, what does Scott Steiner do every time? He lands almost kneeling like The Undertaker and does his fist pump like this, and that makes the crowd go crazy because they want to go crazy with him. But if he just did the Frankensteiner and then picks him up for another move, no one cares, right?
Right.
And so Luger versus Wyndham was a whole lot of that, but the second Luger signaled for the rack, the place lights up. But neither one of them did anything other than that, and the crowd just sat there versus a year earlier. Sting versus Flair, either Flair's telling them to piss off or Sting's howling at him, but they're into the it's not because it was a better match per se, because Luger versus Wyndham was not a bad match. It just feels like it because the crowd sucks. But again, never do either one of these guys. Plus, you're probably a fan of cage matches. Cage matches, to me, just obstruct my vision. That's why, say what you will about the blue cage from the WWF, at least you can see inside that damn thing. When you're watching the camera angles of them fence matches, even the Tully Blanchard versus Magnum TA, it's hard to see what's going on in there unless the guy in the ring's camera's on, right? So you can see inside of it. And then it's too close. So it's like, what do you do?
My
rant's over.
I half agree with your rant on Luger and Wyndham, but the circumstances, TW, you have to remember the circumstances of that 91 bash. Flair left, and the fans were pissed that Flair left because those smart fans knew that Jim Herd ran him out. I didn't even know this, but they knew. Right. But some of those smart fans, those Meltzer fans, really got, into it that no matter what happened, they blamed Jim Herd about it. They knew that Ric Flair was not leaving on his own accord. He was booted out of WCW. So that's why Great American Bash 91 sucked. Well, let me go back to 86 for just a second, TW, since you didn't see that. Like I said, Gordon Soley and Bill Apter hosted this VHS tape, and they gave clips of the great ones. And Flair was defending his title 13 times in, certain different locations. Again, Road Warrior Hawk defended it at the Philadelphia Stadium where the Eagles played and the Philadelphia Phillies played. Again, packed house there. Was great. And then, of course, eventually he would lose it at the end of the Bash tour in a cage, which you hate, the fence cage, to the American Dream, Dusty Rhodes, for his third reign. So, people left happy after a tour like that. When you get to the point of, like, let's say 87 and then to that first pay-per-view part of 88, the business model changes because now, again, if you keep it up with the Joneses of what Vince McMahon is doing, that's hard to do because Vince McMahon's he's already 3 years ahead of marketing. He's already 3 years ahead of his business model because he's not a territory anymore. The WWE is not a territory. They don't even consider themselves an East Coast-based territory. They are a nationwide territory. They are a nationwide company touring in the Carolinas, even though they didn't. If you ever noticed that, those NWA years where they were, packing them houses, WWF never toured the Carolinas because they knew that they would not draw. Or Atlanta. You're right. Absolutely right. But that was the perception, and it's so because of the syndication and all that stuff. So that's the way Vince McMahon was. But now we get into your talk like after 1987 Reflection. We've already talked about the War Games. If you're a real Reflectionite, you know that we've already talked about the War Games of 1987. We don't need to harp on that. But Dusty Rhodes is trying to outdo what he did. You could tell 85 was the first one. You can never top the first one, but the sequel was good with Ric Flair's 13 title defenses in 86. 1987, you had the War Games. So, TW, how do you top, all those three that were, it was successful in terms of touring. It was successful in terms of people paying their hard-earned money, asses in seats. Now you have to venture into the pay-per-view game because those three was closed circuit. So you can actually, you can live with that excuse that, closed circuit is not the technology for closed circuit television is not a premium, and nobody knows where to go. How many movie theaters can you find that is playing the NWA Great American Bash? You can't find it. But now you got the pay-per-view in 1988, Baltimore, Maryland, the Baltimore Arena, the first pay-per-view of the Great American Bash. I believe it was July 7th of 1988, TW. And Dusty Rhodes has got to top himself again. And we can go, and the funny thing about this one, TW, it depends on how you perceive this. Technically, money-wise, I don't know if it was a success. Because if you talk to somebody like Tully Blanchard, he tells you point blank. You know how you get, like, let's say 1 million buys for a pay-per-view, even, I'm just trying to, give you that number, TW. You want to get 1 million pay-per-view buys, WCW? You want to get 1 million pay-per-view buys, Ted Turner? Put Tully and Arn against the Road Warriors. That gives you 1 billion buys. Well, what did Tully and Arn do in that particular year? They opened the show with Sting against Nikita Koloff. So that kind of looks like a bummer, TW. And no disrespect to Sting and Nikita Koloff. But you put the Bro Wars in another gimmick match, the Tower of Doom. 3 cages. There's no David Arquette. There's no NWA title at the top where people are fighting to go up. You're fighting to go down. So TW, I understand that Dusty Rhodes is trying to top himself, but I think he overthought this one, and maybe that's why it wasn't a greater success than it could have been on pay-per-view. What say you, TW?
It's overthinking everything, and you just said it. Tully Blanchard told them what the money match was, and then they don't do it. I want to say it was 91 again. It's the same Clash of the Champions feel before it was a Clash.
91 is your killer year. I can tell you.
90 was the one that felt like Clash, but 91, the opening match is PN News and Bobby Eaton versus Austin, and I don't think it's Pillman. It's Austin and somebody in a scaffold match. And you're just like, what? So now you're just throwing scaffolds out there to throw scaffolds out there. You know, Road Warriors versus Midnight Express scaffold was born out of frustration. Like, these guys want to get their hands on him and kill him, and they can't. So now we're having a scaffold match, which let's be honest, it's a dumb idea. And if no one ever does another scaffold match again, it's a win for everybody. I watched the scaffold match live in Lima, Ohio with Travis Volts about 5 years ago. My buddies were scared shitless on that scaffold, and it wasn't even as high as the one in WCW. But I think what probably happened is they were so worried about the show, the matches were secondary to it. Does that make any sense? They just thought, It doesn't matter what we do, it's the spectacle. And that's where I think you're probably looking at, because if you're not into WWF, WrestleMania 2 isn't WrestleMania worthy. It's George Wells getting DDT by Jake the Snake like it's Saturday Morning Superstars. It's, you know what I mean? There's not the Battle Royals garbage. It's in 3 different cities. It's not their best work. So that's 86, 87, awesome show, but still had Killer Bees versus whoever for a nothing match. It's almost like they're just trying to fill it out. So as I ramble, maybe that's what Dusty thought. If you put Tully and Arn versus Road Warriors, you got all your eggs in one basket. But if you spread them out, you can have, like, 1990 was 11 matches, 5 of which were title, right? So it's obvious they think more is more, when really less is more. I think, again, we're going to talk about NXT Great American Bash too, but I think the thing I like about the NXT, the takeovers are usually 4 or 5 matches, and every single one of them has a story, and every single one of them delivers. And except for this last one. This last one had stupid 2 women tag teams that no one cared about wrestling each other before. It's like, no, now you're starting to lose it, because do that on Wednesday or Tuesday night, right? The takeover should be big, right? And it should be a blow-off, like you said, with Starrcade, right? The takeovers used to happen every 3 months, 4 months, whatever the case may be. So these Great American Bashes, obviously they're tinkering with it, toying with it, trying to figure out what's what and what works and what doesn't. And, again, it's their first pay-per-view version of it. I think they tried to spread out so they had talent everywhere instead of having shorter or longer, better matches instead of 11, 12 fat, quick. Sting versus Nikita was chain 91. Match. That was 91. So they also did an 88?
No, 88. It was Sting and Koloff tag teaming against Tully and Arn for the tag team titles.
Okay, when you said it, I was thinking the chain match. But that was 91. Yeah, again, 91's not good. But exactly. I know we're going all over the place, but here's the thing: I never ever Sting's first title reign was, and by the way, his first one is actually NWA World Heavyweight Champion. I didn't know this until today, doing Wikipedia. Sting was the NWA champion in WCW. He was the NWA champion in TNA. He's the only guy to be NWA, WCW, and TNA world champions. Obviously, no one can ever do that again unless Aldis comes out of nowhere and invents a WCW. But bottom line is, Sting won that belt in July. They built up to him. This was the changing of the guard. This was obviously a year later. They're putting Flair out to pasture, so that this was their idea. Sting lost that belt later, back to Flair at a house show.
In East Rutherford, New Jersey.
So basically, Sting got warriored by Hogan. Warrior got Hogan by Hogan, right?
Mm-hmm, right.
Flair did to Sting what Hogan did to Warrior. Get on their reign, made it end. Michaels did it to Brett, and then Brett left, and Michaels blames Brett for leaving, making his title reign suck as far as money.
Mm-hmm.
And it's crazy to me. And to answer your question, I would say, God, this is going to hurt to say this out loud.
Say it.
I would say Vince was probably right in hindsight to put the belt back on Hogan and take it off of Warrior. The only good thing was at least he had him get screwed by Savage for Slaughter to get it, and it wasn't Hogan beating Warrior to take it back, which would have just diminished everything they did with Warrior beating Hogan, because that was a pretty big moment. That say what you will about the match, that was a big moment, and for whatever reason, and we all know wrestling business ebbs and flows, goes up and down, whatever. I think Flair taking the belt from Sting, however, I don't know the business part of it. I think it was more of that mentality is why Crockett went under and Vince stayed over. Vince does the hard choices when he has to. WCW has that old, this is how it's got to be. You know, Dusty was guilty of that too, that old booking. And
old school booking, it catches up to you.
Yep, and they don't want change. And I again, I don't know how long I was before I figured out. I think I started hearing that term annual board meeting for NWA, and then figured out, okay, every year, Flair, you're going to lose the belt to this guy, and you're going to beat it back a month later, and then that's it. And if you look at it in hindsight, it's blatant, but you don't know that in the moment, right? And so I don't think someone booked Sting to win that belt at the Great American Bash only to lose it at a house show to Flair months later. And then did Flair vacate it?
Yeah, he quit. He quit WCW in 91.
No, it wasn't.
Yes.
Yeah. But they
trust
had it vacated.
You said the learning?
Vader as champion.
No. Trust me. You said the learning trick.
It went to Japan. The next lineage picks up in Japan.
Right.
And that's where that international title comes along.
No, Flair took his belt, the big gold belt, to WWF in 91.
Right.
Then Hurd paid Flair the money that he was owed to him, the $25,000 with interest, because that gold belt meant something. Right. And then he got it back. And then that relationship with WCW and then New Japan and then NWA started to kick in. And that's why I went to Japan on that end. So
but it was all Japanese champions after Flair vacated it.
Yeah, it was Muda and Chono and stuff like that. But they had to pay Flair first, that $25,000 with interest. But anyway, let's get it. Let's go back into the 88 again. You know, you answered a good question that, you know, sometimes less is more, but 88, because that was their first pay-per-view, they did more is more. And that's why the Tower of Doom was the biggest, you know, it was the biggest kind of attraction, but it didn't live up to the hype. So then when you have Flair against Luger, and again, we've harped on this, and I will say this, and, you know, TW, you are a Luger man. Let's focus on Luger in 88, not 91. I know you're going to go into your 91 rant again, but again, the circumstances of Luger winning in 91 was because Flair was out, and he did not properly, and I'm quoting, properly pass the torch to Luger, where that win in 91 felt smaller. It felt like he cheated Luger out of the payoff that he so richly deserved. Let's go back to 88 for just 1 second. Luger against Flair. Again, hindsight is 2020. If you're reading the Aftermags, Reflectionites, and TW, we know that when it's NWA purposes, the two men that everybody has said, hands down, there is no debate. The men to lead wrestling in the 90s, there was two names in the NWA, and you know this. It was Sting and it was Luger. 1988, Great American Bash, the summer tradition that they're trying to do, was the perfect venue, the perfect storm, the perfect opportunity, TW, for him to get that, and they do the schmaz. They do the old school mentality of, well, it's more, we can get suckers to pay more money for him to chase the belt instead of giving the payoff on a pay-per-view audience fan base saying, well, I paid $40. I don't remember the price in 88. I'm going to say $40. I paid $40, and I don't think people felt happy paying $40 to see Luger not at least become the NWA heavyweight champion. So maybe, in my humble opinion, it turned away fans like, I'm getting this because, again, it's Starrcade 88. If you were a sucker again to pay $40 for Starrcade in December, Luger didn't win the belt either there. So you felt cheated, and you felt like, why am I wasting my money not getting at least what I'm booked? Am I right, wrong, or you see it a different way?
Was the Bash the one where Luger had the match stop for bleeding? Because I know that happened in Baltimore.
Baltimore 88. That's the one I'm talking about right now.
And then how did he lose in Starrcade?
Flair had his foot on the ropes, and the referee didn't see it. So it was kind of like a schmaz finish.
But it's funny because I'm going to go to 91 because
I knew you was.
In 88, the guy was fire, right? Like, furious when that match was stopped for the bleeding. And it looked real. Like, I bought it. So as you were saying that, it made me think, I wonder if Luger winning that match against Yokozuna at SummerSlam was a rib on that, right? It seems like he, you know what I mean? Like, he won the match by count out and then celebrated like he won the world title, the balloon spot. I remember leaving there furious. So to answer your question, yeah, I paid money to go see my guy become the WWF World Champion in person, and he wins by count out after a 6-month Lex Express tour, or 2 months because it started in July. And like, what? And then he never did anything else after that. He never he did the double Royal Rumble win, but so now 91, if you watch Luger in this match, he just seems disinterested. And at the very end, after he beats Wyndham in a weird way, you said that it was Harley distracting him. Harley didn't distract him. Curtis Hughes did. He came over to that door, and Wyndham looked at him like, "What are you doing here?" And then Luger went over to Harley, and Harley said, "That finish, surprised if that was booked for Flair, and they just still did it with Wyndham, it would have made more sense versus Flair because he couldn't beat Flair in 88 twice, and now in 91, finally he knew what was missing. He needed someone like Harley, right? It makes more sense. But to do it against Wyndham, you've beaten Wyndham a million times. Why do you need Harley to tell you to power drive? But it's up. And I saw this before, but it just caught my eye again when I watched it earlier. He looks down at Wyndham and goes, "Fucker," or something like that. Like, it's probably motherfucker, right? And I thought, there's no way he's mad at Wyndham. But he's probably thinking, I just won the world title finally. Like, shit, right? Because it wasn't against Flair. The fans were barely into it. And like I said, I understand the fans being mad about Flair, the whole situation. But they knew going in it was Flair versus Wyndham for, I think, 2 weeks at least. They at least had a heads up. It wasn't like Wyndham just walked out in place of Flair and no one knew it, like card subject to change. Because I remember being bummed out, like, what? Why is he wrestling Wyndham? And I also remember thinking he's going to lose, right? So it's almost like him winning. I'm going to put it to hockey. If the Montreal Canadiens win the Stanley Cup, and after the game I saw, I don't know if that's going to happen. But if they win it, there's going to be an asterisk next to it. It's going to be the first time in 30 years that a Canadian team has won the Stanley Cup, and they're going to win it in the season where they didn't play a regular season. They did only Canada versus Canada and then the 3 divisions. No one traveled other than to the divisions. Luger winning that belt from Wyndham is an asterisk. A, he didn't beat a reigning champion. B, which should be A, but I just said it for a second, it's not Flair. So his body language, that whole match is just son of a bitch. Like, this was supposed to be my moment. The only thing I could relate it to for somebody as far as how you think it's going to feel versus how it ends up feeling is a year ago when Drew beat Brock in an empty arena. Like, you don't get that same, you know what I mean? Like, you don't get that payoff that you deserve in front of like that 50,000 people. Yeah. And so I could, and it just sucked for Luger. And they ended up winning the title a million more times. The pop he got for beating Hogan on that first Nitro or a week later, whatever, I don't remember what. The place went bananas. That was redemption for him, right? And it was Hogan. So, but this stuff back then, man, the politics and all that, we're answering your question 100 times about why Jim Crockett went under. Because even though Jim sold it, it's the same mentality carrying forward on WCW. It's amazing they lasted as long as they did, and the only reason they did is Ted Turner's money and the way they did those books by signing those guys with the big contracts to Time Warner, not to WCW. So it's funny that we're
Ted Turner loved
all of WCW instead of Great American Bash.
Ted Turner loved wrestling, but it's a microcosm. That's the word I want to use. It's a microcosm with rise and fall of WCW because Great American Bash is that perfect point of where we see wrestling going, because you see that the certain changes here at TW. You talk about, Luger not getting the storyline. Actually, Luger didn't get his moment in 91, but actually, and this is funny, it's 2020 Wonder. You actually sold me on the finish of Luger and Barry, and that should have been Flair. That the way that Luger won that match in the cage, I can close my eyes right now and picture Flair and Harley doing what he did. It would have been a better maybe summer feud going into December's Starrcade to kind of like relive that nostalgia, if you will.
And now Flair's chasing Luger.
Yeah, and Flair's chasing Luger. But you know what? Flair did the right business move by going into WWF and picking on Hulk Hogan and trying to, get that WrestleMania moment. But again, that's a different politics for another day. So,
but he gave us the best Royal Rumble ever.
Of course, he absolutely. That was one of the greatest Royal Rumbles ever to this day. Still is undisputed top number one all the time. Let's go into these 90s Great American Bashes, because now, as you said with 91, and you said it, wholeheartedly all the time here, TW. We can even rewind. I can say rewind your 91 rant when I'm going to talk about the mid-90s here. It didn't feel big. 92 didn't feel big, and they cut it off. There was no 93 bash. There was no 94 Great American Bash. It came back under the vision of Eric Bischoff trying to, bring back the nostalgia of the Great American Bash. In 95 was Ric Flair against Randy Savage, and I remember that vividly because that was the Legend versus, that was what it was supposed to be.
That's the cover of 91.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's why people were pissed. We didn't get the cover. And everything you just said is the truth right there. That was the way Luger won. That was supposed to be Flair. So it didn't make no sense at all for Barry to do what he did and to play it off. He played Ric Flair as a Hollywood actor. But anyway, in the mid-90s, TW, again, Bischoff tried to revive the Great American Bash in 95. And,
I was there.
Of course he was there. That's why I wanted to bring
for Arn Anderson.
You did a beer run for Arn Anderson, but also you got to enjoy Randy Savage versus Ric Flair, and I believe, he got his revenge for Angelo Poffo, his father.
Was there. Yeah.
Angelo was there. So TW, I think they were still at the Baltimore, or was it Dayton?
No, O'Hare Arena in Dayton, Ohio.
In Dayton, Ohio. So, I guess Bischoff did not want to go back, did not want to be caught in that bubble of the Baltimore trappings, I guess. So Dayton, Ohio is symbolic as Americana, the heart of the what is it called? The heartbeat of America, Dayton, Ohio? Is that what it's called?
It's what Macho Man said to the locker room, rough neighborhood.
Rough neighborhood.
It was. Rough neighborhood. That broke the silence. No one's talking in his locker room. He looks up and goes, rough neighborhood. And it was rough.
Well, you know what? Let's not even talk about let's not even talk about 95 matches. Actually, what is your besides the beer run for Arn Anderson, what is your great TW memories of 95 Bash at Dayton? What were you doing? What was your job there?
So I didn't end up getting booked, but so if you look at the results, they got actually the main event was live before the pay-per-view, and that's where I almost got used. At the end of that main event, Hogan and Vader were getting pulled apart, and they wanted to use me, Scott D'Amore, Canyon, Rhino, and Thumper Lancaster. Thumper Lancaster was in a squash match. He left. Scott D'Amore supposedly got his arm broke by Craig Pittman, so that left me, Rhino, and Canyon, and they were like, that's not enough of us. So they didn't use us. And the show ended with Hogan and Vader getting pulled apart by who? Sting, Macho Man, and Bulldog. Maybe it wasn't Bulldog. I don't know who the third guy was. but they got pulled apart, and I looked at Rhino and go, hey, man, that's only 3 dudes. We could have done this. Granted, all 3 of them are twice our size, and it would have made more sense, for that. But Pillman versus Alex Wright was on that one. The Renegade versus Arn Anderson, where he gave him that stiff-ass splash from the top rope. I think Arn was still wearing the belt. I think they tried to emulate the Honky Tonk Man Ultimate Warrior title change. And then I didn't watch a lot of it because why isn't Luger on this show?
Because he was still in the WWF in 95.
Oh, this is 95. That's why.
Yeah.
I'm dur.
See, you go on a beer run for Arn Anderson, you're drinking the beer.
Right. No, they turned me down. They said they stopped selling intermission. But it was just a cool, my favorite memory of it was just being behind the scenes. And that was my first full year in the wrestling business. So I was 20, almost 22, depending on the date. I don't think that 85 was July 7th because 90 was July 7th. So unless leap year made July 7th come again, it was June 18th. See, June. Great American Bash in June. So I literally was in the business 1 year, still 21 years old. But just being behind the scenes, I was over by where remember the 1-900 numbers where you could call and talk to wrestlers? I was right there, and I would watch wrestlers go sit down and talk. Buff Bagwell went and sit and talk. Scary Sherry. I was over by production. And the funny thing about that arena was, I think I said this before, the arena's very small. They just tore it down last year. It was, you know how
it only holds like 6,000 people.
And that's where I learned the fish lens. So when I went out and sat in the audience to watch a couple things early before I went back to the back, I was like, man, this place is tiny. But then when you're in the back and you're looking at the production on the TV screens, they use what they call a fisheye lens that makes it look bigger. Right. And it looks so much bigger on TV than it was in person, which is usually the opposite, right? Absolutely. TV makes it look smaller than in person, but they used the fisheye lens. But it was cool to see everybody just hanging out and being regular people, right? It was just like a regular indie show. And like I said, that's where Hulkamania died for me. I just told this story the other day. So if you want to know my favorite moment, because I'm sitting in a locker room, Rhino's next to me, we're looking around, I got Macho Man to my left, Sting and Bagwell are right across me, Bagwell's asking me and Terry who we are, Rhino, who we are, and all of a sudden you hear the footprints coming, and it's Hulk Hogan. He ducks his head under the door, because he's taller than the doorway, legit, wearing cowboy boots. We got there at 11 a.m., so this is maybe noon. Ducks his head in, everyone looks his way, and he goes, I just wanted to see what the fuck was going on down here, with a beer in his hand. And I turn to Rhino and I go, it's over. And he goes, what? I go, Hulkamania. I go, this dude told me to say my prayers, eat my vitamins, drink my milk, and he's got a beer at noon, and he just cussed at us. I go, it's over. Everything he told us is a lie. I go, I've been living a lie. For 11 years, I've been living a lie.
Never meet your heroes. That's the old saying. Never meet your heroes, and you be like, you felt cheated. And the funny thing about the mid-'90s Bischoff run Great American Bashes is, number one, it was in June, so he shifted up a month. So from 95 to 2000, which was the last Great American Bashes, they were all in June, in whatever calendar month that was. So in 96, which is a very pivotal point of the wrestling business, this was one month before Bash at the Beach. This was 1 month before Hogan, your hero, officially Hulkamania dies and the NWO lives and breathes new life into the Hulk Hogan character in 96. But in 96, a very pivotal spot happened. And I think that was in Baltimore. I think they went back to Baltimore in 96, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
That was where we saw Kevin Nash and Scott Hall. And they broke the kayfabe walls, TW, and forget about, Mongo McMichael, betraying Kevin Green and joining the Four Horsemen. That wasn't as big as it needed to be. Maybe for storyline purposes, it felt big to people, but it didn't feel big to me. I didn't care about Luger against the Giant for the WCW Heavyweight Championship because the Giant wasn't that dude. It was really all about one spot. It was about 5 minutes of this promo, Bischoff talking to Scott Hall and Kevin Nash, and the questions that, Eric Bischoff had to ask to protect him and the WCW name and trademark brand. So this way they would, throw out that lawsuit that WWF was throwing at WCW in 96 because Vince McMahon felt that they were infringing on copyrighted trademarks of Scott Hall and Kevin Nash using their characteristics of Diesel and Razor Ramon. Of course, that got thrown out. We don't have to talk about that. But again, it's so pivotal.
I think he had to stop using the fake accent, though, didn't he?
Yeah, he eventually did that himself, but he didn't have to. But that 5 minutes, TW, was so pivotal that I think more people remember that, in my opinion, than any match. I remember that, and it's 96, where Kevin Nash, Scott Hall punches Bischoff in the stomach. Kevin Nash grabs him, does the jackknife powerbomb on a table, and now war has started. War is declared on WCW, TW. Why? I guess you even said it a couple of minutes ago, less is more. All these matches meant squat. The storyline of the Four Horsemen meant squat. Less is more is pivotal in that 5 minutes, TW. Agree, disagree, or have a different take?
Absolutely, because they were dying before Hall and Nash got there. Mm-hmm. Dying. Hogan had been there for a few years at this point.
Yeah.
At least a couple. Mm-hmm. That wasn't received well, be it because he's too long in the tooth. He looked skinny as shit when he got there. Mm-hmm. He was corny with all the Baywatch and Thunder in Paradise stuff. And also, I still think there's a contingent of Southern fans who just did not like Hulk Hogan because he's the enemy. It would be like Vince walking in, getting instant heat down there as a heel, but legit heat, like stabbed on your way to the ring and batteries thrown at you, not we want to boo you. So when Hogan turns and everyone throws those cups in the ring and all that stuff, that's heat, man. You don't get that every heel turn. For a while there in the 90s, you got it every week because fans were idiots.
Right.
Just a couple of weeks ago, was it the Islanders? The Islanders won a game in overtime, and your nice New York fans started chucking water bottles and beer cans on the ice to the team that won. And the commentators are like, why are they doing that? And one guy almost tripped on one. And one player swatted one out of the air.
I can answer that, and I'm not defending them, but because they thought that was the last game at the Nassau Coliseum because they're moving. So they just wanted to trash the arena because they knew that they were not going to.
They ended up losing game 7.
They knew they weren't going to win. They weren't going to win against Tampa Bay in Tampa Bay to go to the Stanley Cup final. So they just wanted to trash it to say goodbye.
You know what? I'm going to let my buddies know. That makes perfect sense.
Mm-hmm.
That's New York for you. You expect that in Philly, not New York.
That's love right there. But anyway, go ahead, T.
No, I'm just saying, like, Hogan turning heel gave those Southern fans, even though by then they're a national, global, whatever, but then people down in Atlanta and the Carolinas and Baltimore, because Baltimore was a NWA staple, man. Like, you mentioned Baltimore even when stuff wasn't even in Baltimore because there was so much stuff in Baltimore that you just know that's Carolina's Baltimore, Omni. Those are Crockett territories, and I don't know if that's where Hogan turned, but I didn't like that it was Great American Bash in June and Bash at the Beach in July because I always felt like Bash at the Beach A replaced Bash and B was another version of it. Right. And then the WWF ended up calling it The Bash, and I think that was the last one. They didn't even do it no more after that until they brought it back for NXT, but. Just what's wrong with you're not calling it the series? It's still Survivor Series, even though there's some that don't even have Survivor Series matches. By the way, that used to be the greatest pay-per-view until they ruined it. Royal Rumble.
Everything gets ruined. Everything gets ruined. No matter what, everything gets ruined. The Great American Bash's vision of Dusty Rhodes got ruined because they moved it to June. Royal Rumble will get ruined because it will get ruined. It
already got ruined when it became whoever wins becomes the number one contender. The only thing that makes it better is the thing that I hate most about the WWE is that there's multiple champions that could be chosen from. So that gives you 6 possible winners instead of the obvious one.
Right.
You knew every year Hogan, Austin, or Warrior were winning that thing because you knew that was the match they were setting up. And I mean, specifically, you knew the Warrior was winning that one. You knew Austin was winning that one. You knew Hogan was winning or whatever because they were setting up the match because they had one championship and they had one guy who was being groomed for it. So it just ruined it. But what would save the Rumble for me is the the debuts. That's what saves it, is who's going to show up, whether it be an old guy coming back, an old guy coming back for one night only and doing well, or someone like AJ coming out and popping the crowd because you're like, whoa, he didn't have to go to NXT first. But the Great American Bash, moving it to June doesn't bother me as much. June actually makes more sense for Dusty's vision but not June 18th because it ain't even summer no more. It's summer in June 20-something. But June to November is a 6-month window. November to June is another, December, January, February. So that doesn't bother me. What bothers me is you have the Great American Bash and you have the Bash at the Beach. The Bash at the Beach, I'm telling you, forever I thought was the Great American Bash, and they just called it the Bash at the Beach because this one was outdoors.
It was the extension. Well, again,
it's almost like WrestleMania Backlash, and then they just shortened it to Backlash.
Right. So that's what they try to do. So you can understand that. And like I said, the 5 minutes that Nash and Hall with Eric Bischoff was more bigger than that particular Great American Bash in '96. And of course,
another reason why is what I've said all along. These cards, Ray likes to say this all the time, match card. I hate it. I don't know why I hate it. It bothers me. But the match cards, if you look at them, they're not that good ever.
No, they're not.
Like every one of them has got matches like Dutch Mantel versus Scott Furnace or whatever, Doug Furnace, whatever. Like, who cares? Like, it should be blood feuds on those shows. It should not be. You know what?
There's not that many memorable things in the Great American Bash, especially in the mid-90s, except for maybe Diamond Dallas Page against Macho Man in their trilogy series. There's nothing really memorable. More of the memorable stuff is in the 80s because I remember Flair against Rhodes. I remember the War Games. I remember the Tower of Doom. I remember Luger and Flair and Luger getting his victory taken away from him. That's memorable stuff for a hardcore fan. The Renegade against Arn Anderson, the Renegade against Arn Anderson is not memorable. I just remember it because Hogan tried to shove Renegade down my fucking throat, and it didn't work. And like you said, your hero, Hulk Hogan, drinking a beer is more memorable behind the scenes than Hogan doing anything in the Bash, except Bash at the Beach when he became NWO Hollywood Hulk Hogan. But that was not even a Great American Bash memory. That was a Bash at the Beach memory. So let's close this out, TW. And, we don't have to talk about this, but, after WCW closed its doors in 2001, I think a lot of people, Vince McMahon was caught in a quandary. When you have all this talent, when you're owning wrestling, people actually were trying to hold on because, more people, because when WCW closed its doors, the Southern wrestling fans said, fuck it, I don't want to watch wrestling anymore. They actually just tuned off, and they don't care about, I never liked WWF in the beginning. I ain't going to watch it just because my guys are there. They stayed true to that word. They don't watch it. So what did Vince McMahon have to do? He was caught in a quandary. He thought bringing some tradition from that organization into his home, so to speak, would be would be good. It'd be good for money. It'd be good for business. So he brought the Great American Bash, but it felt like Backlash. It felt like Hell in a Cell. It felt like Money in the Bank. It just didn't feel big because the big pay-per-views of the WWE calendar is WrestleMania, SummerSlam, Survivor Series, and the Royal Rumble. No order, but you already know your 4 top-tier pay-per-views. Great American Bash was not part of that. What say you, TW?
It could have been because the King of the Ring is pretty much all but dead now, and it could have replaced King of the Ring because King of the Ring was the 5th one. And why they ever got rid of that, I don't know, because that pay-per-view made people. It made Bret Hart.
It comes back in ebbs and flows. It depends on when they need it.
Right. No, I know. They're bringing it. The rumors are bringing it back now. Now they're bringing a cross-promotion, all 3 brands tournament, which to me, if you do that, do it with the guys that aren't being used. Have Xavier Woods win it. Somebody like that. Don't have it Randy Orton versus Drew and have these stupid finishes where no one's getting pinned clean. Okay. Matter of fact, I want to say this. That 1990 pay-per-view was Undertaker versus Lex Luger was the match before Sting and Flair. Beautiful finish. Paulie grabs Lex, breaks away from him, and then Luger's on the rope for the heart punch. Remember, Mark Callis' move was the heart punch.
Yeah.
He goes to hit him. Luger just boots him in the face, turns around and grabs Paul Lee, knocks him out, turns around again and just hits a clothesline on Callis, pins him 1, 2, 3. That's a good finish. An out-of-nowhere finish. It looks like Luger overcame the odds or whatever. Doesn't bury the Undertaker because he didn't tap out to the torture rack or the pile driver or whatever. It was a good finish. And it was a good match. And so I don't know what made me want to say that just before we moved on, but the Great American Bash, you could have either – what I don't like about it now, because I know eventually we're going to talk about NXT, but actually talking about it now makes it actually okay. I don't like that last year it was a regular NXT show just called Great American Bash. That's what the one coming up is too. I'd rather it be TakeOver Great American Bash, right? Because it being a regular Tuesday night show, you're still going to have the stuff that's Saturday morning superstar.
Well, AEW fans can answer your question. Why did they put it on Tuesday? Because it was a ratings bump because they needed to make a Tuesday feel special. TW.
Right.
So that's why they brought the Great American Bash back for NXT purposes.
But last year was 2 nights, so it was Wednesday, Thursday, I think.
Yeah, something
I think
like
it was Finn Balor was the Thursday night one, and I think he won the title. Did Finn beat?
Last year? No, it was Keith Lee winning, I think, or Karrion Kross. Yeah, something like that. I forget what it was.
I thought it was Finn Balor because Finn Balor had that belt for almost a year.
No, it was Keith Lee against Adam Cole for the NXT title, and Keith Lee won it.
Maybe it was just Finn Balor's debut.
It could have been, but that was
it was 2 nights, and I like that they made it 2 nights at least. But this one coming up is just 1 night. It's got big match feel to it. And since we're dogging on Great American Bash, to be fair, is also glorified. Clash of the Champions, because the difference with Clash of the Champions versus these is the Clash of the Champions doesn't have every title defended on it. It's usually the U.S. tags and maybe the world title or the U.S. or maybe the TV, whereas Starrcade and Great American Bash had all of them. So that's better, but you can trim the fat and get rid of all these Dutch Mantel versus Doug Furnas and all that. Had that as a pre-show, don't air it, whatever. Let me ask you a question real quick because I wanted to ask you this earlier. So you said earlier the pay-per-view was $40. I remember them being $29.99 forever, and that was still a lot of money for the 80s and 90s. I think it was 39, maybe 29 or 39.95. Yeah, then it went to like 49.95, and at one point WrestleMania was like 80. So
yes, something like that.
So let me ask you this: so at what point do you think it gets to? This is where I think it hurts Gate. I don't think it's ever going to hurt WrestleMania because A, good luck getting a ticket, and B, people are going to that because they want to go to that. But something like SummerSlam is in Detroit. It's at the Auburn Hills. That's an hour ride for me without traffic. So now it's an hour and a half to 2 hours with traffic, and the ride home's even worse because everyone's leaving at the same time versus getting there, spread out because some people came early to tailgate, blah, blah, blah. So if I pay $100 for a ticket and my buddy pays $100 for a ticket and my other buddy pays $100 for a ticket because there's 3 of us, so that's $300. It's an hour to 2 hour car ride, concessions, all that. We do this. Where does it just say, you know what? Let's just all throw in $25 and watch it on TV. Like, how much of that do you think happens?
You know what? I think more fans want to pay for the experience. And if you know how big that pay-per-view is, and SummerSlam is going to, and for your SummerSlam or just any pay-per-view question, let's use SummerSlam right now because that's going to be the next big event for WWE. It's in Las Vegas. It's in the stadium where the Las Vegas Raiders are playing, and you can fill 50,000 easy. So you want to pay for the experience of being in the stadium. And it's going to be
some people's first time going somewhere since COVID.
Right. And that's a good answer too. So I think you could use Great American Bash, that theory. Like, would you want to pay, let's say, would you want to like drive all the way to Florida for Full Sail or the Capitol Wrestling Center, wherever the WWE does their show, to be a couple of hundred in NXT, even though they give out a good product? It's 5 big matches. Like you said, it's storyline driven and, it feels big, but is it worth my time, or should I just watch it on USA Network, or should I just, pay it on Peacock $10 a month? I think that's a great analogy of I'll just watch it on Peacock. But if you're on the stadium front, like SummerSlam or Royal Rumble or WrestleMania, you're going to think twice. I'll pay extra as long as the experience is good. I don't know about the card because sometimes the card is, it's a hit or miss. But I think the experience of meeting people and from all over the country supersedes a bullshit card. I don't know. That's just my humble opinion.
And that's what Dusty thought in 88, 85. And
it didn't work.
I'll tell you this. From my experience, I would go to NXT TakeOver, right? Because that's non-commercial, right? It's a pay-per-view, basically.
Okay.
I'd have a hard time going to NXT on Tuesday Night Live after finally having been to a Raw and a SmackDown. It is an awkward feeling being there live versus being at home. Because for one, Raw is to some point using guys as job guys, right? They got Ricochet's Tom Zink. Like, he's going to wrestle. It's going to be a good match, but he's losing, right? And then every now and again he does win. But for the most part, you got a handful of guys that lose. You been to one live, Raw or SmackDown?
Yes.
So when they come to the ring and they go to commercial, they just sit in the ring in the dark for 2 minutes. And then when it's live and they go to the commercial during the commercial or during the match, they don't. It ain't that blatant. They don't just go cut and go to your corners, but you see the difference in the match. Like someone told them we're a commercial, and they do a rest hold, or they'll do a bump into a rest hold so that when it comes back on, they're in a rest hold, and that's weird to me. And not hearing commentating doesn't help either.
Right.
But I would go to NXT TakeOver because it would feel more like a big atmosphere thing. NXT, that Great American Bash thing, I wouldn't go to because it's going to have commercials, and they're going to have that, all right, we're a commercial, sit in the dark in the corner, and it's just weird to me, and it's long. Like, those 2-minute commercials are long.
Right. Well, now with the commercials, TW, they do picture-in-picture sometimes, so you can't...
During the match. Yeah.
Right, during the match. So this way, they might still do rest holds, TW, but... You know what? Let's close this out. Like you said, you would not go to an NXT Great American Bash, even though that Triple H. I would. Let's close this out right. I mean, Triple H wants to acknowledge the nostalgia of the Great American Bash. Of course, why not pimp that name out? They already pimped out Starrcade as a house show, and that's stupid. People want Halloween Havoc because there's an October, and they don't want to use it
in Carolina, though. Don't they do it in the neck of the woods that it was?
They did that one year. I don't remember if they did that every year. So it's hard to say they did.
I don't think they did it last year.
No, that's, again, with COVID, they didn't do it. But
they did it for like 2 years in a row.
Yeah, but one
Cody and Dustin. So that's years ago.
Yeah, that's the years. But again, it just shows you they don't cherish it. They don't want to respect it, and they don't. It could. Well, it wasn't a paper. It was just a special. It was just. It was just.
What
a
if
special.
No one showed up? What if no one showed up?
They turned off the lights, so I can't tell. I can't answer your question. So, but again, the old saying that if Vince McMahon didn't create it, he doesn't nurture it. So he didn't create Great American Bash, Reflectionites, so he doesn't nurture the Great American Bash. Triple H is trying to nurture the Great American Bash, TW. You talked about it. Last year, Adam Cole, Keith Lee, it was title for title. It was the North American Championship. Keith Lee had the North American title against Adam Cole being the longest reigning NXT champion. It was title for title. And, of course, Keith Lee came out and, they're already fucking up Keith Lee's career right now. And I don't want to get into the politics there, but it felt big enough. It beat AEW Dynamite in the ratings for that particular 2-week window. But you said it, TW, you rather it be on Peacock or the WWE Network as a full takeover with no commercials. Close out, give your final thoughts of, can NXT bring any nostalgia to the Great American Bash? Can it be nurtured under the umbrella of Triple H and under the umbrella of NXT? Let's close that out.
Absolutely. And let me just qualify what I mean. If NXT Great American Bash came to Detroit, I'd go.
Okay.
I meant I wouldn't drive the Full Sail to watch it down there versus watching it on TV. A regular NXT house show, I would go. NXT live on Tuesday night, I would feel like, I would be underwhelmed, I think, especially 2 hours on a Tuesday night, right? But to answer your question, absolutely, because the one show I look forward to every single year for NXT the most is War Games. And it's different without the Undisputed Era in it. I just think the first, they just own it. And I even didn't like, Travis didn't like the 3-team concept. That's my least favorite, but they still had an awesome War Games. That might have been one of the best ones. I didn't like the concept. I don't like the predictability of the heels always win the coin toss, so it's always 2 against 1 heels. I think just do it where 2 guys come out every time. 2 guys it's going to be at the upper hand, and 2 guys get in there, and you can change it that way. Or just leave it the way it is, and just for 2 hours suspend your disbelief. But I think I don't know how much Triple H control is NXT, because you have to feel at some point Vince still puts his fingers in there, right? Because
it seems like it.
If it's just Triple H running everything, then he would have already have let him take over Raw or SmackDown. You know what I mean? Because I would gather NXT is the most respected of the 3. I think with the IWC, YWC, it's because it's mostly Ring of Honor or TNA guys. Like, who I really, really like right now? And I think he would be good for the Great American Bash scenario and the War Game scenario. He's an NWA field guy, is LA Knight. I hate that name. I love that he embraced it. He's basically ringmastering that shit until someone says, all right, well, let's just call you Eli Drake.
Okay.
So I think you have the talent down there that they can have those matches as long as you don't put those stupid filler girl tag. And again, it could have been guy tag teams. I don't care. But the girl tag team matches where they're not even tag teams. It was like Michelle Martinez and somebody versus those 2 girls with the dude from Jersey Shore. It just made no sense. I don't even remember seeing it. I just remember reading about it the next day, and I'm like, did I go cook something while that match happened? Because I didn't remember it. But get rid of the filler. I'd rather have 4 longer matches than 5 matches that are a little bit shorter so they can put 5 people on there. And I've said this before. I liked NXT better as an hour show than a 2-hour show.
Everybody said that, and it's hurting them right now for being 2 hours. So it's losing its luster.
I would much rather them do hour on Tuesday nights and then have it AEW Dark. Somewhere else have your up-and-comer people, right? But I think Triple H, is an NWA traditionalist. I think he trained with Killer Kowalski. I think he probably is someone who watched it growing up, so has a feel for it, whereas Vince is more like that was the competition. Triple H just enjoyed it. Vince hated it. So that's why I think you're right. He didn't create it, he doesn't nurture it, but I think Triple H will nurture something that he was a fan of himself.
Okay. And with that, Reflectionites, we close this special spotlight on the Great American Bash. We hope you enjoyed the nostalgia. And of course, with the WWE, they always fuck up everything. So anyway, let's close this out. TW, give out those socials so we can get out of here and we can drink our beers and eat our hot dogs and hamburgers on this July 4th weekend.
All righty. The show is at PW Reflection. Then we got at Big Ray Hernandez, the guy that makes it all possible for us. And Ray, thanks for the email thanking us for our nice comments about you last week. My Twitter and my political Twitter and my Instagram are at TommyWonder19. Snapchat is #Wonder. I have at the Tommy Wonder where I talk about the more wrestling and pop culture stuff. Dum Dum Duel and an Idiot is our YouTube page. Our good man who's missing in action, he's about to get Travis Volts by me. You're going to have to start giving this handle, is at the P1JB. And then obviously bigvitobrand.wixsite.com and patreon.com/the Big Vito Brand. And also facebook.com/Tommy Wonder for me.
And special shout out to Vito and his wife, Noelle. They had on their Facebook, TW and Reflectionites, they suffered a loss. So we just offering our condolences and prayers, during these troubled times. So I know if they listen, Big Vito, just keep your head up and, our prayers are with you, my brother. So you can find me on my Twitter at PWSOPROF. That's PWSOPROF. And of course, you can find me and the guys on the YouTube, the PWSO YouTube page. TW, you're part of the introductions on the PWSO YouTubes. if you noticed.
All right. I did not notice it.
You gotta watch
that stuff, man.
Do I have to do everything? Can't you just be? You are a grown-ass man.
I'm working and sleeping. That's what I'm doing these days.
Okay, and of course, follow my guys. Billy Ray Valentine, Mr. Infinite Fringe himself. He's got the documents on every political leader in the world at Obi-Wan You Know Me. And of course, the king of the reactions, 8-Track Brown at 8-Track Dashley. TW, let's go back to the movies. We were already eating the hot dogs. We were already eating the hamburgers. We've already had the corn on the cobs and the beers. So let's keep that eating tradition going as we go back to the movies, and we're going to watch and review the A-Team, the episode called Body Slam, where Hulk Hogan and Mr. T are tag teaming in 1985, TW.
You didn't do that already?
No, we didn't. We did not do A-Team. Trust me. We did Body Slam. We did Body Slam, the series with Jesse Ventura and Roddy Piper. We did not do A-Team, the Body Slam episode with Mr. T and Hulk Hogan. So we're going to go back to the movies on that one. And I'll do my due diligence and find you a link for that free A-Team episode. But
maybe it's on Peacock. It's an NBC show.
Maybe. So we'll check. Check on the Peacock.
By the way, everyone bitches about the Peacock. I watched a couple different Great American Bashes. They have so much stuff uploaded on there. My only gripe is I get it free now because I have Xfinity. I'm going to find a way to pay the extra $5 and not get commercials. Those commercials drive me up a wall because it's the same damn commercial every time. Jake from State Farm or a movie preview for The Purge. And they're a minute long, which I guess is at least bearable because you know how long your death sentence is before the thing kicks back on. But
it's the piss break.
I think, is leaps and bounds better than people give it credit for.
Yeah, it is, but pay for the premium so this way you don't have to get those commercial interruptions. But anyway, I'm the professor. That's Mr. Wonderful TWD Iron Stomach One saying good night, and we will see you next time as we go back to the movies. A-Team, Hulk Hogan, B.A. Baraka style. Good night, Reflectionites.
I love my mama.
I love my papa.